I've worked all my life essentially on development, but mostly on what environment and particularly climate change means for development, for developing countries, and most importantly for the poorest and most vulnerable communities around the world. Uh, and religion is such an important integral part of people's lives and how they lead their life, that connection between religion and environment, I think, is a central one, not only for the future of the world's environment, but I would argue for the future of the world's religions. If I look at the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa, it's not the middle of the East, it's actually the center of the earth in many ways. If you look at it historically, it's the cradle of civilizations. If you look at it from a religious point of view, the three largest organized religions of the world all emanate from here, the Abrahamic tradition. If you look at philosophy, but if you also look from an environmental point of view, and the challenges as well as the opportunities and the landscapes and the issues that define the environment of this region, it really is the perfect place to talk about that linkage between religion and the environment. This idea that I posed of trying to provoke thought by having us think about, is environmentalism a pseudo religion? It doesn't suggest that environmentalism is an actual religion, that there are people who think that this is the belief set. But if you actually look at the actions and beliefs of those of us who call ourselves environmentalists, a lot of it is very much a set of beliefs, a set of priorities, a set of understandings of good and bad, a set of implications of our actions, many, many, many things that are common with religion. I do not think that environmentalism sees itself, or environmentalists see themselves as being part of a religion. But I do think that the rise of environmentalism at a particular point of time, and now I'm talking the 70s, the 80s, and early the 90s, was coincidental with people seeking a spiritual refuge when confronted with this great challenge of the environment. So I think there are parallels there. I would not draw those parallels too directly, but I think it is very, very interesting to look at that bridge of the belief sets. And I think there is opportunity there, because I think those people of us who call themselves environmentalists, who want the world's environment to be in a better state, are motivated by a lot of the same spiritual goals that those who call themselves religious are. And there are bridges to be made. I do think that we are at a very special moment in certainly the evolution of the environmental challenge, and maybe also in the evolution of the economic challenges, the social challenges, and the religious understandings, the spiritual challenges that confront the world at this particular. So I do think we are in a special moment. I do not think that environment and religion, or ecology and religion, have ever been really opposing forces, but I do think that they have been defined by a sense of mutual distrust of each other, of not really knowing how far to go. And I think that is where both the challenge and the opportunity lies. And this is what I mean. I think back in the 1990s, when a lot of this conversation began, the challenge was different than it is today. At that point, the challenge was the intellectual challenge, the scholarly challenge was, let us demonstrate the link, the importance that religions place upon nature. Let us show how all the great religions of the world, in fact, do take nature, do take the environment very seriously. So at that point, the challenge was of awareness. Today, 2 decades into this century, simple awareness is neither the big challenge nor enough. Now the challenge is of action. So it is moving from better understanding the belief set to translating the belief set into behavior. As a layperson, right? I'm not a theologist. I'm not a scholar of religion. But as a layperson, what do I see religion as doing in society? It gives people a sense of purpose. It gives people a sense of connection to their belief set and so on and so forth. But it also gives people a way of understanding their relationships with each other, their relationships with their society. I think action will partly come from expanding that idea of relationships to also now include our relationship with the planet, our relationship with the ecology, our relationships with our natural surroundings. It is not that that relationship wasn't there before. It is not that religion did not earlier talk about it. It is simply that the world was a big place. Ecology didn't have the dangers it is facing today. So, because of the pressures on our ecological system, that particular relationship has become much more important. It is a relationship, and I'm talking the relationship to nature and the environment around us, that does mean a lot for our own spiritual health. It does mean a lot for our own spiritual well being. And that, to me, is one of the central pillars of all religions. In particular, if you think about climate change, and climate change is not just about the climate, it's become actually an expansive metaphor for all things environment because the forces are so strong and because the system is so interconnected. But think about climate change. So, for the last 20 years, we were talking about what's called mitigation, meaning the hope, the idea that we will somehow be able to mitigate the problem. And that means we will somehow reduce our footprint. We will somehow reduce our carbon. So all the effort was, let's try to reduce carbon. Unfortunately, we weren't very good at it. And now we are left with a world where we have to continue doing that, but there's also the challenge of what's called adaptation. What that means is we have to adapt to the impacts. Now, here is where water and carbon comes in. When you were trying to reduce your carbon, it was much more of a mechanical, technocratic issue. I will move to a Tesla. I will move to fuels that are less polluting. I will move to renewables, right? And all of those are very, very good things and important things, but they were more technological. When you come to the impacts, that is real impacts on human beings. In that story, it is not technology, but people and the well-being of people that becomes the central actor. And water is what that story is written in. Water is the ink of that story. Let me tell you how. Think about what happens when the climate changes. Much of it, not all, but much of it is about water. As I mentioned, it's water rising, sea level rise. It's water melting, glaciers. It's water disappearing, drought. It's water falling from the sky like no one's business, extreme events. Right? And water is so central to the fabric of human life that we will have to confront environment as a human problem. And this is where I think the environmentalists come in. Because environmentalists have largely, mostly, only given lip service to people. It's an issue of cute and cuddly animals. It's an issue of managing the carbon molecule. People are usually the problem who come in the way. But people is what our species is. And I think that again is where that potential to link the power of religion and to link the challenge of environment together comes in. I'm a great fan and believer in technology. I think it's done great things for the human race. I think there are some great advances happening. But I also very strongly feel that in many ways, we in this generation have turned the environment into just a technocratic puzzle to solve. And technology clearly has a role, but the compact we've made, the deal we've made is, I will not change my lifestyle. You will just give me better toys so that I can continue living the way I was. And somehow the environment will be affected less. I will get a car that runs on a battery. I will get a smart home where the lights turn off. And yes, all of those are useful, but frankly, there is no math in the world by which you can lick this problem without confronting the lifestyle choices that you make. Until now, we, and by we I mean not just those of us in the US, but the rich of the world everywhere, have refused to change our lifestyle. That, I think, is the central puzzle of certainly climate change, central puzzle of environment, and probably the central place where religion can play a role. Because if we remain in this bubble that I will not change my lifestyle, but somehow the toys around me will have less of an impact, with 7.5 billion people in the world and going up, that is not going to solve the problem. And then there is the divide between the haves and the many, many, many have-nots. So you are in really a turmoil there. And therefore, I do think that the central issue here is one of human arrogance. I think we are in a race between human knowledge and human wisdom. We have the knowledge to lick this problem. We can change our lifestyles in ways that will not hurt us. But do we have the wisdom to act in time? And my own thought is that I have not seen evidence of that wisdom because we are still a very, very arrogant species. We have had a footprint on this planet like no other species has or can. And at some point, we have to step back and say, think about, what my lifestyle does, not only to other species on the planet, but to other people on the planet. And that's not an easy challenge. That's not a challenge that's going to be solved by economics. That's not a challenge that's going to be solved by science. That's not even a challenge that's going to be solved by politics. It is a challenge that will be solved by human values. I do think we need to ask more of religion. In some ways, a lot of the conversation on religion and environment, I think it's all very good and it's all very useful. But I think it's asking too little. It's asking sort of religious leaders to talk a little bit more about the environment, to highlight how religion and environment are compatible. I think we are still stuck in the 1990s when the issue was awareness. I think we need religious leadership, spiritual leadership, to step up and say, this is a lifestyle issue. This is an issue of the lifestyles of not only this generation, but future generations. And we have a role to play in answering the central question of all religions in all time. And that central question is, what is a good life? And today, the question, what is a good life, cannot be answered without also answering, what is a good environment?